Good morning and welcome to the webinar. My name is George Manalo-Claire and I will be your moderator. There's an awkward moment at the beginning of every webinar when you wonder if anybody is out there. So if somebody wants to test the question box, feel free to send a message saying you can hear us loud and clear. If at any point you experience problems with the webinar, please text me. You'll see my number there, 415-794-6080. Just send us a text and we'll address any problems that may arise during the webinar today. So thank you for joining us. I want to make sure that you all are in the right place. If you are eager to hear about how one of the top selling points for summer meals is that it gets kids out of the house, if you want to hear how that is in conflict or tension with fears that many immigrant households have of going outside, then you're in the right place. If you want to hear about how existing barriers to public assistance programs are being challenged by new concerns about immigration, then you are in the right place. And if you're eager to hear about actions you can take to solve all of these problems, again, you're in the right place, and welcome to the webinar. I want to give a special thanks to our friends at the California Department of Education, Nutrition Services Division. It was with their encouragement that we went quickly to take action on this issue. They expressed concerns that as school was closing, that we would see some challenges in terms of participation in summer meals because of increased concerns around immigration. So I want to thank them for their encouragement, and from that encouragement, we did move quickly to get this project in place, and that was thanks to our funders. I want to particularly call out the Stupsky Foundation for providing support for the Bay Area focus groups, but also for support for this discussion today. We also received support from the California Healthcare Foundation, from our good friends and partners Share Our Strength and their No Kid Hungry campaign, the Walter and Elise Haas Fund, and Alliance Healthcare Foundation, who provided support for our San Diego focus groups and our San Diego discussion. We are very, very grateful for all of this support. We also benefited from some key partners. Alameda County Community Food Bank has been a terrific partner on this project at every step of the way, and you'll hear from them in this broadcast. In San Diego, we were lucky to also have the support of the San Diego Hunger Coalition. If you are like these partners, your interest in this topic may be even bigger than the issue of summer meals. Recognizing that summer meals are just one of the many public assistance programs that may be challenged in this new environment, I think you'll be grateful to hear from Alameda Food Bank and others that there are some lessons learned from this work that can be applied to other public assistance programs as well. We have a great group of speakers today. I want to show you what's in store. We've got Mike Perry from Perry Undum, who's going to provide some insights gained from conversations with immigrant households here in California. We're also going to hear from Liz Gomez and Allison Pratt from the Alameda County Community Food Bank. They're going to share their responses to this research and also highlight some of the activities that they and other partners are doing in response to some of the concerns and challenges raised. We're then going to hear from Betsy from the California Immigrant Policy Center, who's going to place this work in a broader context of immigration policy. And then finally, we'll hear from Anna Colby from CFPA, who will try to wrap it all up in terms of actions you can take to respond to what you have learned. Along the way, we do want to gather your questions. We're going to leave time at the end to ensure that we're addressing those questions. The way that can work, it's two ways. There's a question box that exists on the webinar panel. Feel free to type in your questions at any time, actually, please type them in as they come to you. We want to collect them and gather them up so that we are ready to respond to those when the time comes after our speakers have presented. The other way is to send me a text. Send me a text at 415-794-6080, and we will share the questions with the panelists that way. So I think that is all of the logistics. So let's begin, and let's let Mike Perry go ahead and share what he's learned.
Thank you, George. And like George, I want to thank all the funders of this project. I think it was really important to hear directly from parents in mixed status families about what their lives are like right now and how they feel about public assistance programs, particularly the summer meal programs. So George has agreed to turn my slide. So if you could turn a slide, George, that would be great.
Sure.
What we did is we did 4 focus groups. We held 2 in San Diego. We held 2 in Fremont. You'll look at the dates and see that we held these groups in late May. So obviously some time has elapsed, and as we talk about parents' awareness of summer meals and they're thinking about what they're going to be doing for meals for their children for the summer, that may have changed. But we were doing this research in late May. School is still in. We conducted this research all in Spanish. We had 42 parents participate in this research. This is not a huge amount of research. It's really the tip of the iceberg. I really encourage more of this checking in with families and parents as you know, in the upcoming months. But it was really important to hear their voice. And again, all of these parents, either they themselves were undocumented or their partner in the household was undocumented. Next slide. So I think one of the big things that came across to us is this idea that families don't feel safe anymore. The idea, the concept, the notion of safety is just gone from their lives right now. They think about, are worried about deportation around the clock. This has changed since the election of Donald Trump. This is when their world turned upside down. They're doing a lot of things, I'll get into detail in a minute, to change their lives, to avoid risk, to just stay off the radar as much as possible. They are really tracking local stories, deportation stories. They mostly through Facebook, through friends, through their communities, through their family members. There's a lot of discussion about what's going on in the community, but social media tends to be driving a lot of their thinking and their information right now. Next slide. One thing that we knew was present, but we were surprised at the degree to which parents really talked about it in this conversation, was the amount of racism they're experiencing in their lives, and discrimination has really gone way up since Donald Trump came to office. They say that, in their own words, Donald Trump has given permission for these kind of racist behaviors and for prejudice to be on the surface now. It's affecting their lives in many ways. One way is economic discrimination, inability to get jobs, some lost jobs among these parents. It's just really challenging. They also felt there was some discrimination within their community, with more established Latinos being frustrated, discriminating against sort of newer arrivals. We did an exercise where we asked them for a word that describes what it feels like to be a Latino immigrant right now in the U.S., and these are some of the words that came to the top: frustrated, anguished, sad, separated families, terrorized, stressed, discriminated against, rights violated. Next slide. They are, we must be ready to leave. They're making plans. They are thinking about the future. They are not taking for granted that they are going to be able to remain in the U.S. So they are doing things like seeing attorneys. They're appointing guardians for their children. They are looking into citizenship, dual citizenship for their children. They are saving money as much as they can. They're thinking about leaving. Next slide. I mentioned some of the behavior changes that have happened. These were the ones most frequently mentioned by parents. They are staying home. They like to stay as a family unit. That matters when it comes to summer meal programs, which I'll mention in a minute. They want to make sure locations where meals are provided are really close to home. So closeness to home, not wanting their children far away, is a really strong feeling among parents right now. they've stopped going to certain locations in their community that there have been raids or they feel exposed. They avoid large groupings of Latinos. They feel safer when there's more diversity in other races and ethnic groups there. One mother talked about taking classes to be deemed more worthy of staying. They feel that there is a really negative image of Latinos right now and immigrants right now in the U.S., and they want to counter that by good behaviors. They're fixing tail lights. They're making sure there's no reason to be stopped by police. They are changing jobs or staying in jobs just to, they don't feel that there's going to be a lot of opportunity for them in the next couple of years, and so they're just staying put. They're avoiding anything that would draw attention to themselves. Next slide. So one thing, these are all parents, they have young children, they're really concerned about impacts on children. They feel there's some trauma here happening to their children. They are trying to protect them. They are really not letting them answer the door, not turning off the TV, trying to really restrict their social media. They're putting on a brave face, even though parents are scared themselves, but their children have become fearful. That was the main theme we heard from these parents. These are really scary times for children. They're afraid. Their big fear, of course, is being separated from their parents, not knowing when they return home if their parents are going to be returning home as well. So this is a big added pressure on parents right now as they're worried about the impacts on their children. Next slide. So I just gave you an insight into the world and the environment. You probably know all of these things already, but it was important to get that out because it impacts how they think about enrolling in public programs and enrolling in summer meal programs. So overall, their attitude towards government programs, public assistance programs, is that most said they were really not interested in or going to take the risk of signing up for a program now. So we had a number of parents who had children enrolled in programs who were going to keep them enrolled, but new enrollment seemed very unlikely by these parents. They're afraid that it would expose them, that completing applications would make them more vulnerable. Social security numbers, immigration status, these things worry them. Some of the complex application processes they're afraid of, so they really are shying away from that. There's also this idea that if they want to become documented later on or pursue citizenship, that enrollment in a public program would be held against them. This predates what's happening right now. This feeling's come up in a lot of the work that I've done before, but it's even higher now. There's also the idea that they don't want to be seen as abusing the system. It's again this negative image that they're perceiving around the immigrant community right now. They don't want to fall into that. They don't want to be seen as people who are using government resources. For their children, though, they're willing to take more risks. All of these parents had children enrolled in school meal programs already. So that was one hurdle they were able to overcome. Somehow the enrollment process, although it varied in these different sites, seemed not to expose parents as much. At least that was their perception. We had a number of parents who had children involved in Medi-Cal. WIC also came up as a kind of program that parents felt more comfortable with. There were a lot of questions around CalFresh, around eligibility, around could they qualify, even questions, basic questions around the program and asking what it was. So I think there's a wealth of research that could be done around public assistance programs right now in this community. We only scratched the surface, but a lot of barriers to enrollment right now. Next slide. Food insecurity is an issue to some degree for all the parents. Mostly it was the idea that when it gets to the end of the month and money is tight, the diets really change. Less nutritious foods, but cheaper, inexpensive foods were on the table for families. It's a reason they really like the school meal programs, and it is a reason why they're interested in the summer meal programs. It's a big budget helper to have their children participate in the program, a way for them to get nutritious meals. So they value that element of school meal programs. Next slide. So as I mentioned, school meal programs during the year, all of these parents participate, really positive feelings. Most of the hands would fly up when you ask about, their positive feelings around the program. They really appreciate it. Many of their children have friends who participate. They don't feel stigma participating in the meal programs. For some, it's their main food, the breakfast and lunches, main food the child gets during the day. It's convenient. These are working parents. Convenience and lack of time is a big issue. So they really value school meal programs. There were a few parents who felt that the meals could be healthier, that there was too much unhealthy food that were part of school meal programs, but overall, it was a sense that parents were really happy with the meals and felt they were nutritious. Next slide. So now we come to the summer meal programs. Initially, parents, it just was not on their radar at all. And partly it's because what the environment is around them right now. These are really stressed out parents, and they have this hunker down mentality right now, which is keeping their children close, staying home. So that works against enrolling and having their children participate in summer meal programs. They are right now, at least in end of May, we're thinking, I'm just going to keep my child home. I can feed them at home. Home is safe. And that's where they wanted to be. So it wasn't really on their radar. They hadn't heard much about it by end of May, and they had these instincts which worked against enrolling their child in a summer meal program. When we gave them the description on the right, this is a English translation. They heard it in Spanish. Once we gave them that information, they were immediately interested. Free was the key word here. Getting a sense that they could qualify because they already participate in the summer meal programs, suggesting maybe their school, they could continue to go to their school was another draw. So it drew parents in, just the description. They were interested. After hearing this, most of the parents wanted to learn more and think about enrolling their child. Next slide. We tested messages. I'm not going to go through them all. You're going to get these slides later so you can see all the different messages that we tested. The best message was a combination of the idea of getting the meals, but also having activities and learning opportunities as well. So this combination of meals, but also activities, my child being active, is a good combination. And so I would focus on that. We felt that if we just zeroed in on the meals too much, we'd be missing out this part that parents really liked, which was getting their children out of the house and being active and possibly having learning opportunities. So that is the combination we're recommending. Meals, but also these other activities as well at these sites. Next slide. There are not really big barriers to this. Lack of awareness, which I've already mentioned, was the main one. There are immigration concerns which bubbled to the top more and more as we talked about where the locations might be for the summer meal. So those would be the main barriers. Lack of awareness, it wasn't on their radar. They hadn't heard much about summer meals by late May. And then the other idea was, where are these locations? Will I feel comfortable with my child going there? Next slide. So we did dig down deep on what kind of assurances could we say to parents that were believable, that were true, that would help them overcome possible immigration concerns with participation in summer meal programs. You'll see in the box, two of them actually did well. One of them is circled. It is a saying to parents that you can sign up your children without giving their immigration status or the immigration status of anyone in their family. They really liked hearing that there's not a really in-depth application here that went into immigration issues with their family. So they liked hearing that. But the second one underneath it was also important. The idea that there would be a trained professional who could protect their children if ICE agents appeared at the site was something that was powerful for parents. Wanting the idea that their children could be protected was key. So those were the two main ideas that we tested that gave parents some comfort with sites, and those are the kinds of things we would recommend you say to help overcome some of their immigration worries. Next slide. So we did test the notion of sensitive locations, and we did not have much luck, to be honest, in trying to describe what those were, or it didn't have the effect I think that we were hoping it might, which is to add comfort to parents that these are locations where they could feel some reassurance that their children would be safe, and that did not happen. In fact, sensitive locations backfired somewhat because it couldn't guarantee 100% safety. That, you know, we kept hearing from parents the question, well, that still means ICE agents could show up at the site, right? They're not legally restricted from showing up there. And when they learned that that was actually true, that the ICE agents could show up, it made them feel more vulnerable. So in a way, it actually backfired and highlighted their vulnerability. And so we left and this happened in all 4 of the focus groups, we left thinking that sensitive locations may not be the way to talk about the sites where meal programs were. Next slide. Their preference is actually to go to their school. Schools have really been, I have to say, for these parents, the place where they feel pretty comfortable. They've had really good things to say about their schools and school principals and teachers and the meetings they've gone to since the election of Donald Trump at their schools to talk about their rights and what's in place to protect their children. And that has been the place that parents have learned a lot. It's actually school. So if they could continue to go to their child's school to get the summer meals, then parents are all good. That's great. If the school's not available, it has to be nearby and close. I mentioned that earlier. Next level down are YMCA, Boys and Girls Clubs, or rec centers they are familiar with. They're also locations where they feel a level of comfort. They seem to be torn on churches and libraries, mixed feelings, some pro and con around the table as sites. And then we also talked about the idea of police stations, and no surprise, that did not go over well with parents as a site for meal programs. Next slide. In terms of messengers, we were trying to get at who would you need to hear about summer meal programs from to feel secure and to feel a real interest and that this is a good, authentic voice for you. And they went back to their schools first and foremost again. Schools and teachers were who they trust most. They talked about school newsletters, emails from schools. That is a way that actually some of the parents had already heard about the summer meal programs. They also talked about Facebook. That's a big way that they were communicating with each other, and flyers home from school is another way. Beyond that, we didn't have much luck. We talked about politicians, both on the state level and locally, and it wasn't that they were distrusted. There was just a lack of familiarity with them. We also talked about local organizations, and although some parents had connections to local organizations that work with immigrant families, a number of people around the table did not have those connections and had a lot of questions about what the group does. They'd heard of them, but they didn't know the details. So it went back to schools mainly as a big source of information on this. Next slide. So I am getting to wrap up here. We tested symbols. It became clear to us that parents wanted some kind of visual or that would reassure them that, in their words, that immigrants were welcome. That was the idea that they wanted these symbols to convey. We tested 5 symbols. We were not experts in this, and we just pulled these from the web, but we wanted just to put these ideas in front of parents. The one that tested best was the top left-hand corner here is the faces of the children. The idea of children being on some kind of image was positive. Main thing here, however, that we do think symbols should be used. All parents said they'd like a meal location to have a symbol there on the materials or at the location that would be friendly and welcoming. Was the main thing they were looking for, a welcoming kind of symbol. They did not want anything that was aggressive or too strong. Next slide. So wrapping up, what are the recommendations coming out of this research? First and foremost, reaching parents soon with messages was a big learning for us. It wasn't on their radar. They were beginning to think about summer, so now is the time, obviously, to reach them with information. Secondly, schools, teachers, rec centers, and Facebook were the main way that they wanted to learn about it. Third is parents had really basic facts. Once they learned about the school meal programs, they went right into the details. You know, where are the sites? When are they open? Are the meals free? Those kinds of questions. So getting them basic information. The fourth is if you're using messaging, we suggest combining free healthy meals with learning and activities. That's the combination we think is best. You can even mention about getting kids out of the house. That came up. That was the exact words that parents used in every focus group. Number 5, make clear that the applications don't, not a big application process here at all, that immigration status is not something that's going to be asked of parents. It's really important. 6th point is if there are trained adults on the premises who can protect their children, they want to hear about that. Last slide. And final bit of advice here is we think you should, if you can, I know schools just seem to be the source that parents really trust the most, but girls clubs, boys clubs, YMCAs, rec centers are really popular as well. 8 is about overpromising safety. We got pushback when we kept on using that word, and they just felt that wasn't realistic right now. So what was better was a notion of welcoming. It was welcoming to immigrants. Number 9 is we suggest, just on these 4 focus groups, not using terminology around sensitive locations. It just did not connect with parents. 10 is, we talked about it, the image, the messaging should be welcoming. 11 is use a symbol if you can. And 12 is, and this came from parents, it's about policy making. And it's around the idea of making it, giving sites where children are present, 100% immunity from ICE agents, that they wouldn't be allowed there. This is what parents kept asking us for the focus groups. Is there any kind of law where our children at these sites would be 100% protected? That's what they wanted. So George, I'll leave my slides there.
Thank you very much, Mike. And if you have any questions for Mike, I do encourage you to put them in the question box in that webinar panel, and we'll hold questions to the end, but start putting those in now. And we'll move on to our friends from Alameda County Community Food Bank. Liz and Allison, take it away.
Great, thank you, George. Good morning, everyone. My name is Liz Gomez. I am the Associate Director of Client Services here at the Food Bank. And really, I just want to give you a quick overview of just some of the direct client service programs that our Food Bank operates. We do offer CalFresh application assistance. Our program has been in operation for 14 years now, and we have 15 bilingual staff who provide assistance in Spanish, Cantonese, Mandarin, and Vietnamese. We do this at venues throughout the county, including WIC offices, clinics, schools, libraries, and other community sites. We also operate a call center where we help answer questions of callers and assist with the application for CalFresh right over the phone. And lastly, we have an emergency food helpline that helps to connect callers to neighborhood food pantries and soup kitchens. And our helpline does provide over 1,600 referrals monthly. So with regard to the summer meals program, we do outreach. We inform our clients about opportunities where they can their children can have a hot meal. We operate a call center where we're actively connecting each caller to the helpline to their closest summer meal sites. And in general, historic trends have shown that calls to our helpline go up during the summer months when kids are home, and so we definitely understand the importance of the summer meal program. And I'm moving the slide. It's moving a little slow.
I'll give you a hand here.
Thank you, George. George, I'll just let you move those for me. Thank you.
Great.
I want to share with you just a few of the stories on the impact of the leaked executive order at the end of February. Immediately following, we began hearing from our clients. The first week alone, we had over 40 households that called us for help in contacting their worker to stop or cancel their CalFresh benefits. We also had many families that did not show up for their appointments that they had for assistance in completing their application. One of the calls was from an elderly U.S. citizen who lives with his wife who has LPR status. They are both legally eligible to receive benefits, but they decided to cancel their benefits for fear that it could affect his wife. And in addition, our food helpline clients also called, to have their name be removed from our helpline database for fears that, that they somehow their information would be shared, and they feared being deported. Next slide, please. So hearing our clients call to cancel and stop benefits and just understanding and knowing that their families are truly indeed eligible and depend on these programs to help feed their families is really just disheartening. Establishing trust in our community is critical to us, and so continuing to create that welcoming, trusting, and friendly environment is indeed a priority. Some of the actions that we took, that we made right away, we wanted to make sure that our staff that are out in the field received an immigrants' rights training, just so that they could be equipped with information if clients are to ask them of just advice on what to do, without offering legal advice, but at least knowing what their basic rights are. We also handed red cards to our clients, Know Your Rights cards. I think the majority of us have seen those. And we're also always in the loop as far as those Know Your Rights trainings that are out in the community. As clients come here for services for CalFresh, we make sure that they know what trainings are out in the community. And we also worked with our local social services office for messaging. We wanted to make sure that our message was aligned. And really what we came up with is we wanted to stick to the facts. No executive order has been signed. Nothing has changed. CalFresh remains a nutrition program that is available to all people who need and qualify for it. And we wanted to make sure that people made an informed decision about moving forward, and that it was, on their own. Next slide, please. We understand that the political climate has made an overall impact on programs such as summer meals, CalFresh, WIC. And I think for us, one of the things that we still struggle with is just finding that right message to help alleviate the fears around immigration. What would make people comfortable? What is that safe message? And truth is that there is no safe message. There is no guarantee of 100% safety, and that is troubling to us. But we do want to reassure our clients. We would like to reassure our clients that things are okay. And at the same time, we don't really know. So we want to make sure that we don't overpromise. Next slide, please. So combating the stigma on these programs feels a lot more challenging now. It's as if we've taken multiple steps backwards. One of the things that we also wanted to make sure is that if folks were, feared applying for programs like CalFresh or school meals, where they do have to provide more, personal identification, we wanted to make sure that they still had a resource for food. And through our helpline, we wanted to make sure that people knew that, excuse me, that the information that they provide to us is confidential, is not shared with anyone, and if they choose to remain anonymous, that is something that is available to them. Next slide, please. With regard to messages, in February, we sent out a direct mail campaign to close to 100,000 households that receive Medi-Cal but are not currently on CalFresh. This mailer was sent to English, Spanish, and Chinese-speaking households. This time around, the return rate for Spanish and Chinese was significantly lower than in previous years. Overall, less than 1% return compared to 3 and 4% in previous years. So we definitely saw the impact of, just the new administration and again, reaffirmed the stigma and the fears that people have. So we do know that we face greater challenges, but we will continue to do what we can to address the lack of awareness and misconceptions and myths that still exist around food programs, and particularly CalFresh. Next slide, please. We are about to print this Healthy Food Resources in Alameda County guide. The guide is in English and Spanish. We collaborated with various agencies, including WIC, the School Meals Program, summer meals, CalFresh, Head Start, and also the senior meal programs. So it's a complete guide with information about available food programs. One thing that's important to note is that the title of this guide was tested with clients, and overwhelmingly the word healthy kept coming up as something that would be of interest to them. In addition, the faces of children and families in the guide also came up as being important to them. Next slide, please. And moving forward in the coming weeks, we will be testing a Facebook ad campaign that, based on the findings, excuse me, seems to come up as a major form in which households are communicating now through Facebook. A lot of clients do have smartphones, and really that's their way of communication now. This ad campaign will target low-income English preferred Latinos, targeting also low-income African Americans with households income of less than $30,000 and between the ages of 25 and 54. It's a 4-month campaign. It is estimated to do over 1.5 million impressions, and more than 11,000 people will actually engage with the ad. It's not something that we've done before, so we're looking forward to it. I think it'll be interesting to see, what the return rate is. And the ad will basically help link people to our foodnow.net website, which helps to connect users with the local food pantry or CalFresh assistance. So hoping for a great outcome. I think if we have a good outcome, we'll still be on top. And our goal is just to ensure that people receive information in a language that they could understand, and ensure that people don't go hungry. And that's all I have. Thank you, George.
Great. Thank you, Liz. And please, if you have questions for Liz and for her colleague Allison, send them in using the question box.
And now we'll hear from Robin and Jenny at the San Diego Hunger Coalition about how they've been working to address immigration concerns at summer meal sites.
We also heard that this is a very difficult and complex situation from our partners, and a lot of them are expressing that they're not really sure what to do. San Diego also has a high population of undocumented individuals here in the county, with approximately 207,000. And we also know that ICE does have a presence here in San Diego and has arrested individuals for detainment or deportation. So knowing this, we knew we wanted to address the issue, making sure that kids continue to access summer meal sites throughout the summer and food assistance in general for these families.
So I wanted to take a few moments and just talk to you how we have implemented what we learned through the focus group, and then also putting it into practice. And this slide should be coming up shortly. So we started with our summer meals task force that we have in San Diego. And in April, the task force requested reliable resources around food insecurity and immigration. The Hunger Coalition had 3 different presentations over 2 months, which provided a boots-on-the-ground type of information for the task force members. This information began with a discussion about current administration has created uncertainty and confusion in many immigrant communities, leading families to become more hesitant in seeking vital anti-hunger resources or voluntarily withdrawing from government food assistance programs. Most importantly, as a group, the providers agree we will continue to support the families with benefits and serve them what they are entitled. So the second part of our presentation, we had the senior attorney from Legal Aid San Diego, Legal Aid Society of San Diego, provided the members an overview of the executive orders, some Civics 101 information, certainly the U.S. Department of Homeland Security versus U.S. Customs and Border versus the Customs Enforcement. which was the one of most interest because they are the enforcement for our interior port of entry, not the port of entry. And so the community is also needs to know their rights and how to exercise them. In addition, it's important for the community to develop a safety plan, including family information gathering, what documents should be organized, and if required, a place of care for the children. And the community members need to provide qualified immigration attorneys and accredited representatives for the families who are seeking information, and to remember to be realistic and honest with the community while trying not to scare them. And we have been realizing that that is not an easy focus to follow. But lastly, we wanted to say that all of this information has been disseminated to our task force members and asked them to share that with their partners, and we've created a few resources that we have on our website, and Jenny will talk about those shortly. What we have been doing at the Hunger Coalition, we've worked very closely with the Greater San Diego YMCA, knowing that this is a trusted location for our immigrant families. Last year, we opened the summer meals in City Heights at the Copley YMCA. It was so popular that they continued on with the at-risk supper program through one of our community partners. And then this summer, the Palomar Family YMCA in Escondido, we helped them to partner with the Escondido Union School District to serve meals to the community's children when the local school site is closed some weeks over this summer. And then another win that came from our discussions as well as the expansion for outreach on our focus group was that children in the city, locally of National City, it's a small area where there have been no summer meals or after-school snacks served. So the youth center decided to open their doors to the community, and the food program is being sponsored by the South Bay Union School District. They anticipate about 25 children a day and seeing that grow up to as much as 50.
So some other work that we've been doing with our Summer Meal Task Force is helping with messaging. So we wanted to make sure that we were supporting with the most effective messaging possible for these families. And that really simply includes an emphasis on the fact that there's no registration and no signups for these sites. And like Mike mentioned earlier, that all children are welcome. Really making sure that it's inclusive language to the entire community and that folks do not feel that it is targeted specifically to them. So it's not a homogeneous group of people at a site that could be targeted, but rather a diverse group of people. This is what's about to come up on your screens is our recommendation sheet that we developed for sponsors and sites in San Diego County, and you'll just see the arrows pointing to the recommended language of no registration or signups required. And the next example we have for you is a flyer we developed this summer based on Share Our Strength flyer last year. And you can see here an emphasis on a free, safe place to hang out with your friends, really hitting up on that idea of getting the kids out of the house and meeting other kids and being in the parks or YMCAs or other locations, as well as, once again, everyone's welcome and there's no registration or signups required, and that it's also free. The next slide shows another document that we've been using. We've been disseminating these Know Your Rights card in several different languages developed by the ACLU here, really to make sure that we're being proactive and helping our partners give out information to the community that will allow people to be as informed and educated about what their rights are as possible.
And then lastly, we wanted to share with you how we have implemented some of the recommendations from our focus groups for our families. And we were able to do this with the support of the City of Oceanside and Oceanside Unified School District to hold 2 summer meal barbecue kickoffs. We had the first one last Thursday. It had music, a bounce house, barbecue lunch, which featured local produce of fresh fruits and vegetables, and this meal was enjoyed by children and adults. We had more than 500 community members enjoying the event along with 25 community sponsors. This event provided exactly what our families requested: fresh, healthy food, increased awareness, outreach through the school channels, completed and done through all calls, as well as a specified flyer and many education and physical activities for the children and their families. It was a place where the community could receive resources to stretch their summer food budgets and learning about local resources available for their families. A second event will be planned and taking place actually this Thursday at Libby Lake Park in Oceanside.
And that's it from us at the San Diego Hunger Coalition. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And we'll move on now to Betsy from CIPC. Take it away, Betsy.
Thank you, George. And if you can help me move the slides, that would be great.
Happy to do that.
Thank you. So I will be talking a little bit about just the landscape that we're facing today, and some best practices and internal policies that many of you working in various settings can help implement. So a little bit about the California Immigrant Policy Center. We are a statewide immigrant rights advocacy group that provides technical assistance. We analyze legislation, and we also introduce legislation with many key legislatures. And I want to begin by just talking a little bit about just the anti-immigrant climate that we're facing today. Definitely these are difficult times for immigrant communities. President Trump has signed various executive orders advancing aggressive immigration enforcement and threatening sanctuary cities, and has made comments related to limiting public benefits to certain immigrants. So definitely all of this has impacted immigrant communities and the way that they seek services or even how they behave or how much they're going out. The administration targeting of immigrants, their scare tactics, and the draconian detention and deportation machine has caused an increased fear and anxiety in immigrant families. As many of you probably heard or witnessed, are fearful of enrolling and utilizing health and public benefits. We heard from our partners and from many folks that immigrant families are missing appointments, doctor visits, are asking to be disenrolled from health and public benefits, and are also confused about the various executive orders and any changes to public charge, particularly around a leaked doc executive order changing the way we look at and implement public charge. So a lot of confusion, and I think a lot of folks are seeking clarity. Next two slides, please. Next slide, yes. So the fear of deportation makes communities less healthy, and I think as the research pointed out earlier in the webinar, immigrants change their health-seeking behaviors for themselves and their family members if they fear of being stopped by police or have a potential for deportation. A variety of research across the U.S. have shown that immigrants have, like I said, missed medical appointments or used public services less often. So this definitely could impact the way that people are seeking education around diabetes or vaccines, prenatal care, access to food, or any other information that's needed to make themselves make healthy choices or make them healthier. So people are also, a lot of immigrants are afraid to use the parks. They're afraid to exercise outdoors or participate in their communities. We've heard from a lot of families that they have limited where they go and where their children go, particularly because they have heard of stories of parents being taken away, a couple blocks from a school, or parents being taken away from, right as they're coming outside their home. So families are very, very vigilant about where they go to and where their children go to as well. Next slide. So because of all this fear and anxiety with accessing health and public benefits, we have some really quick best practices and considerations. I'm not going to go through all of them. You're going to get these slides, but just two that I want to make sure that I highlight is, definitely be a strong ally and speak up, show up, and ask yourself, what kind of support do I provide my patient, client, or community member that I work with that goes beyond my job duties? Does that mean that may mean that I have to, as an individual or maybe with a coworker, identify community resources and partner with organizations that provide legal and education or other immigration services that you can link families to. This is very, very important because often we get questions on, where can we refer families for application assistance for DACA or naturalization, or finding out if they are eligible for any immigration status, or a lot of folks need attorneys and they want, so having this handy is really helpful when you are working with immigrant families. Next slide. So the other two that I want to point out in this slide is, and I'm going to talk about it in the next couple of slides, but one of them is helping reduce fear by making sure that internal policies, whether that's the library or the YMCA or the school, that they don't create any additional obstacles for immigrants. The last one I want to point out is, provide training for all staff and volunteers on how to work with immigrant families. And this may be around preparing if there is an ICE agent that comes in, or what do you do when families have questions around their immigrant rights. And so having this training so staff and volunteers are equipped with this knowledge and have tools ready to assist families is very important. Next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about sensitive locations, because it was brought up in the research. I just want to acknowledge that we definitely need to figure out how we better message sensitive locations or safe spaces for immigrant communities. This is just for your purposes to understand what that means. So we know that schools, community centers, libraries, and churches are gathering spaces and resource hubs for those that may not have access or are fearful to receive services elsewhere. So there was a nice memo that came out in 2011 called the Enforcement Actions at or Focus on Sensitive Locations. The memo says that immigration enforcement actions are to be avoided at sensitive locations. And this sensitive location includes schools, churches, hospitals, a site of funeral, wedding, or other religious services, and a site of public demonstration like a march or rally. ICE defines enforcement actions as including arrest, interviews, searches, and surveillance done for purposes of immigration enforcement only. Also know that in terms of the list of sensitive locations, that list is not exclusive, so there could be other instances where a sensitive location can be identified or can be exercised with any, if, for example, there's an organization that assists with children, pregnant women, survivors of crime or abuse. And so that list is definitely not exclusive. I also want to note that this memo is guidance and, excuse me, is a guidance and not necessarily the law, or it's basically a guidance of how ICE interacts in certain areas. So there's a lot of questioning whether, ICE agents are really following through with this ICE memo. We've heard, of stories of parents and children, ICE agents wanting to get information from children and going to schools or arresting parents a few blocks away from school. So definitely there is a new sort of feeling that ICE agents really don't care, and they're feeling really bold and about exercising their job to detain and deport people. So something that I know, and I think this is why the research, was interesting to hear, where families were like, well, we can't really guarantee that everything's a sensitive location because we know ICE goes to these locations. So just something to note. There are limitations to sensitive locations. So while immigration enforcement, as I mentioned, is limited to sensitive locations, immigration agents can still enter a public area of a healthcare facility without a warrant or the facility's consent and may question any person present. So, however, the people in the center have a right to remain silent, and this is where the Know Your Rights cards are really, really important, and the training for staff and volunteers is also very important. I also want to talk about two legislative bills that are moving forward that are going to help with declaring safe spaces for immigrant communities and ensure privacy of personal information. It's SB 54, the California Values Act, and SB 244, the Privacy Protection Act. Essentially, the California Values Act would limit state and local law enforcement agencies from engaging with immigration enforcement except in very narrow circumstances. And SB 244 enhances privacy protections in our state and prohibits any sharing without a subpoena for any individual's information for a state's criminal investigation. So two very good bills, and if you have any questions about it, I'm happy to answer. So next slide. I just want to quickly go over what centers and providers can do, and I won't go through all of this, but just so you get a sense. You know, one of the really important pieces on this slide is that it is important to make signs and documents in multiple languages that are linguistically sensitive and avoid alienating vocabulary. So a lot of the examples before about, you know, the signs that are welcoming of immigrant communities or that have these pictures of bienvenidos and all that, that's really helpful, and it helps people really feel welcome and it makes them feel comfortable, even though they know that not every place is safe for them. Next slide. So this is where I want to focus my time on. So one of the things that I suggest is that, you know, centers or should really look at, you know, internal policies and procedures that limit law enforcement in premises. So I know a lot of organizations and community health centers are looking at, you know, are meeting with their legal counsel and looking at what is considered a private space, what is considered a public space, and how do we limit local law enforcement from coming into to these premises. I suggest that you also look at establishing an ICE protocol and train staff on procedures and policy. So there could be a training on, you know, what does an ICE agent look like? What to do if immigration agents enter a facility? Practice a scenario role-playing. What does a warrant look like, and when is it valid? How do you keep sensitive documents and information? Where do you keep that? And how do you report a violation? So these are all just examples of what that training could look like. I also, once again, suggest that there be know your rights materials and consider providing this information while families wait for their food or when they drop off their child. Lastly, I recommend that you build a relationship with legal centers or attorneys so that you can refer families to, you can seek advice on policy and procedures, and you can also reach out to them when ICE does enter your facility. And lastly, that's my contact information, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Great. And we do have a lot of questions rolling in, so I'm going to ask our next presenter, Anna, to perhaps pick up the pace a little bit so we can get to these questions. I'd like to be able to respond to folks. So Anna, take it away, and you will have access to the presentation, so she may move quickly through the slides, but you'll have access to the slides later on.
Okay, so to start, my name is Anna Colby. I am with CFPA, and I will be talking to you today about policy opportunities to foster safe and welcoming spaces at summer meal sites and beyond. So to start, I want to rewind a little bit and kind of frame this in the context of summer hunger. Sorry, George, can you?
Sure.
Oh, there we go. Okay, thanks. So in California and really across the nation, summertime brings the very real risk of hunger for California. So over 2 million of our children live in households that struggle to put enough food on the table. And while these stats aren't specific to our immigrant children, we know that immigrant families may face additional risks. They may be eligible for fewer public benefits or may be hesitant to access public benefits. Many low-income children rely on school meals during the school year. So there's a lot at stake when schools let out for the summer. Next slide, please. Luckily, there are summer meal programs that provide free and reduced price meals to students across our state. These meals support the health, well-being, and academic success of our students. Next. Yet during summer 2016, 1.7 million, and that is 85% of our low-income students, missed out on summer lunches. So these are students that are accessing free and reduced price summer lunches during the school year and missing out on similar meals during the summer. So sponsors and sites, community-based partners, the Department of Education, and others are working very hard to provide summer meals to children across our state. However, there are a lot of barriers to accessing free or low-cost summer meals. So barriers such as lack of transportation, extreme weather conditions, lack of walkable routes, just to name a few. Our immigrant families face these barriers to accessing summer meals, plus additional barriers that the prior presenters have spoke about that come along with the fear of immigration enforcement. Next. So policy actions have the potential to make a big impact across our state. While immigration policy is set at a federal level, there's a lot that our state can do to improve access to summer meals. So to address those barriers I just spoke about and to foster safe and welcoming spaces for immigrant families. Of course, like others have said, we can't guarantee 100% safety, but we can take steps to provide additional protections for our immigrant families. And our state is already taking some action. So Betsy spoke about, gave some examples of legislations, that our state is currently, advancing. So CFPA recommends exploring approaches similar to the current state legislative efforts and other policy efforts where we can look to broaden or expand protection for immigrant families for summer meals and, ultimately to access public benefit programs. So while my recommendations are framed in terms of summer meals, ultimately have an eye for policy actions that could address barriers to immigrant families to accessing food more broadly. Next. For instance, we could explore policy action that would, sorry, I guess I'm getting ahead of myself, but prohibit immigration enforcement activities. Betsy gave some great examples here of how that's already, how there's some state legislations that are already looking at that. So we can look at broadening or expanding that to cover summer meal sites or other benefit programs. We could look at policies, actions that would restrict the collection of sharing of participant information. Of course, during the summer, one of the benefits is that we're already, summer meal programs are, there is no registration required. So that is definitely a benefit. But we can look at other policies that could more explicitly provide protections for our immigrant communities. And we could look at policy actions that support outreach efforts to families and training for site staff. So Betsy gave some great examples as well of internal policies and protocols for training for site staff. So are there statewide policy actions that we can look at to support some of those examples that she provided? So next. So I want to end here with, I thank you all and commend you all for taking the step of being on the call today. I encourage you to take concrete action based on the recommendations that you have heard. I also encourage you to stay involved. I've put a link here to CFPA's action alerts. We can, to stay involved, please subscribe. And I would like to also end with saying we have a great resource on our website, our Schools Out Who Ate report that talks about summer hunger, and I've included the link there. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. We're going to try to work through as many of the questions we have received. You can continue to send questions to us. The questions we don't get to, we can happily send those to you in a follow-up email. Let me see if Betsy can help with a couple of acronyms that were used. Somebody's asking what a CBP agent is, and another person is asking what is LPR status.
Yes, so CBP they are the Customs and Border Protection. So they are the folks that are, the folks that are near the border, and then they also have been known to, be in the areas of San Diego as well. And then the other one you said LPR. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so LPR is immigration status. It's lawful permanent residency, so also known as a green card holder.
Great. And then Anna, somebody asked a question about what the difference is between summer meal programs and summer EBT.
Okay, great. So summer meal programs are meal programs that, meals that are provided at site during the summer months. So they're very similar to the school meal programs, meals that are provided at schools during the school year, except during the summer, they're oftentimes provided at schools, as well as community sites, so libraries, parks, rec centers, churches, and others throughout the community. And many of these sites are in low income or high need areas and serve all students. So any student can show up and receive a free meal. The summer EBT program is a demonstration project that is not currently available in California. So summer EBT for children is a project that or a demonstration project that would provide nutrition assistance or funds for food on an EBT or a debit-like card. So to date, summer EBT for children exists as a demonstration project by the USDA, and it has been tested in 8 states, but it is not currently in California. And although it is a well-tested model that has been rigorously evaluated and could be a good option to provide additional benefits for children during the summer months to be able to, for their families to be able to purchase food during the summer, for those children that don't have access to summer meal sites.
Great. There is a question, and any panelists can answer this. Can you recommend a trainer or agency for a staff immigrant rights training? What resources can we offer folks on the webinar today for immigrant rights training?
Well, if this is related to the training that I suggest that staff and volunteers can receive, I would suggest that folks get, I know that CCF is actually doing a very extensive training, and I can send folks that information, but I know that our team, as well as the National Immigration Law Center, has provided some training. Of course, things are evolving, so there's new information we always get, so happy to follow up.
So we could put that in the follow-up email to participants in the webinar, some of those resources, if that is of interest. There is a couple of questions related to sensitive locations. One is, how does sanctuary city / state work with sensitive locations? And there's another question, which more of a wants people to know if there's a confirmation that ICE is supposed to avoid these sensitive locations, that we cannot guarantee that ICE will not be present. So Betsy, you want to explain the difference between sanctuary city and sensitive locations?
Yeah, so a sanctuary city is a city that limits its cooperation with enforcement agency. So the sanctuary cities will limit the way that immigrants interact with local law enforcement and how they're funneled through. So when immigrants encounter local law enforcement, there are some instances where that facilitates their deportation because they go through a system where it detects that maybe they had a prior, they had a warrant, or they had some criminal past, or they had a removal order. So sanctuary cities just limits that cooperation. One of them, as you probably know, is San Francisco, and there are efforts, in LA, Los Angeles, to make that sanctuary city as well. And like I mentioned, SB 54 is actually what a lot of people are calling that a sanctuary bill, which, once again, will limit its cooperation between local law enforcement and the enforcement agencies.
Okay. We are actually at our time limit, but I want to see if I can squeeze in having Mike answer 2 questions. There's one question about what concerns were expressed about libraries specifically, and what went into the choice of Fremont as a location for the focus group.
The first question on libraries, I think it was just lack of familiarity. It was not a location that a lot of these particular parents spent time in, so it wasn't that it was a negative, it was just less familiar with. And then George, what was the second question?
Oh, the choice of Fremont as a location for the focus groups.
Why do we choose Fremont, George? I can't remember.
We chose Fremont both because funding in the Bay Area, and there's also an existing sort of anchor community location where we could draw people from to build the recruitment for the focus group. Okay.
Great.
So there's just a few more questions that are left. We'll try to answer those in a follow-up email. I do apologize for going a minute or two over. You will get copies of this presentation as well as some ways you can get involved in addressing some of the concerns you heard today. If you have any questions in the meantime, please do reach out to n@cfpa.net, but we'll be in touch. Thank you all for participating, and thanks to our funders again and to our panelists. Have a good day. Take care.